The steel door slams shut behind him, and everything Elliot thought he knew about survival dies in that echo. He stands frozen in the center of the 8x10 cell, his designer luggage replaced by a mesh bag containing 2 uniforms, 1 towel, and the remainder of his innocence. 23 years old, pale skin that's never seen a day of real labor, hands that have only ever held a pen or a wine glass. He doesn't belong here, but the judge didn't care about belonging. Wire fraud carries mandatory minimums, even for first-time offenders from good families. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. The cell already has an occupant. He's sitting on the bottom bunk, forearms resting on his knees, watching Elliot with an expression that gives away nothing. Tall doesn't begin to describe him. He unfolds from the bunk like a man who has learned to make himself smaller than he actually is, and even then, he seems to fill the entire space. His skin is deep brown, his head shaved clean, his shoulders broad enough to block out the fluorescent light from the corridor. Prison blues hang on his frame like they were tailored for someone else, stretched tight across his chest and arms. "Top bunk's yours," the man says. His voice is low, textured like gravel wrapped in velvet. "Name's Dante." Elliot's throat is so dry he can barely force out his own name. Elliot Chen. Dante nods once, then returns to his bunk, pulling out a worn paperback and effectively dismissing him. Elliot climbs to the top bunk with shaking hands, every movement feeling watched, even though Dante's eyes never leave his book. The first night, Elliot doesn't sleep. He lies rigid on the thin mattress, listening to the sounds of the prison settling around him. Distant shouts, metal clanging, footsteps echoing off concrete. Below him, Dante's breathing is steady and even. How does he sleep so calmly? How long has he been here to become this comfortable in hell? Morning comes with a buzzer that makes Elliot nearly fall out of bed. Dante is already up, already dressed, standing at the small steel sink, brushing his teeth. Elliot fumbles with his uniform, hyper-aware of how exposed he is, how vulnerable. When he finally manages to dress and climb down, Dante is watching him in the small mirror. "First time inside?" Dante asks, though it's clearly not a question. Elliot nods, not trusting his voice. "Thought so." Dante rinses his mouth, then turns to face him directly. "You're going to want to stay close to me today. Yard time especially. Don't talk to anyone I don't introduce you to. Don't make eye contact with anyone wearing blue bandanas. Don't accept anything from anyone. Understand?" "Why are you helping me?" The question escapes before Elliot can stop it. Something flickers across Dante's face. Amusement maybe, or something darker. "Because you're my cellmate. That makes you my responsibility, whether I like it or not. And because..." He pauses, his gaze traveling over Elliot in a way that makes heat crawl up his neck. "You won't last a day without someone looking out for you." The assessment should feel insulting. Instead, it feels like truth, and truth has teeth. Breakfast is in a massive cafeteria that smells like industrial cleaning solution and desperation. Dante leads him through the line, occasionally nodding at other inmates who step aside without question. They find a table in the corner, and Elliot realizes with creeping awareness that every man who approaches stops just short of their space, like there's an invisible barrier only he can't see. "You've got pull here," Elliot observes quietly. "I've got respect," Dante corrects. "Difference is important. Pull is about fear. Respect is about understanding that I keep my word and I don't start trouble I can't finish." "What are you in for?" The question is rude, probably dangerous, but Elliot can't stop himself from asking. Dante takes a long drink of the coffee that barely deserves the name. "Aggravated assault. Guy put his hands on my sister. I put him in the hospital. Judge said I went too far." His jaw tightens. "I'd do it again." There's something about the casual violence in those words that should terrify Elliot. Instead, he finds himself studying the man across from him with new understanding. Dante isn't a criminal in the way Elliot always imagined criminals. He's a man who made a choice to protect someone he loved, and he's paying the price without regret. "What about you?" Dante asks. "Pretty boy like you, I'm guessing white collar." The nickname makes Elliot's face flush. "Wire fraud. Made some bad decisions at my firm. Moved money around to cover losses that weren't supposed to exist. Got caught. How much? 4 million. Dante whistles low. And they gave you how long? 18 months. Could be 12 with good behavior. You won't make it 12 weeks if you don't toughen up. Dante leans forward, and Elliot becomes acutely aware of how much larger this man is, how much space he occupies. Prison has rules, Chen. Different rules than outside. You need to learn them fast. The rest of the day passes in a blur of orientations and assessments. Elliot is assigned to the library, a small mercy considering some inmates are sent to the kitchen or the workshop. But the library detail means he'll be alone for hours at a time, and the thought terrifies him more than he wants to admit. When they return to their cell that evening, Elliot is exhausted in a way he's never experienced. Every muscle is tense, every nerve raw from hypervigilance. Dante sprawls on his bunk with that same paperback, seemingly unbothered by the tension that makes Elliot want to crawl out of his own skin. "Can I ask you something?" Elliot ventures from the top bunk. "You're going to anyway. Why are you really helping me? You don't know me. I'm just some guy who happened to get assigned to your cell." The silence stretches so long, Elliot thinks Dante isn't going to answer. Then, "Had a cellmate before you. Kid from the suburbs, in for drug possession. Thought he could make friends, play it cool, act like he belonged." Dante's voice goes flat. 3 weeks in, he got cornered in the showers. Spent the rest of his sentence in protective custody, and even that wasn't enough. He tried to hang himself with a bedsheet 2 months before his release. Elliot's blood runs cold. "So yeah," Dante continues, "I'm helping you because I don't want to watch that happen again. Call it guilt. Call it whatever you want." "What happened to him? After?" "Made it. Got out. Got therapy. Got his life back together from what I heard. But he'll carry that with him forever." Dante finally looks up at him, and Elliot sees something in those dark eyes that might be pain. Prison doesn't end when you leave, Chen. It follows you. That night, Elliot lies awake again, but this time it's Dante's words that keep him from sleep. He thinks about the kid who tried to hang himself, about the violence that lives in every corner of this place, about how quickly everything he thought was solid can crumble. Below him, Dante shifts in his bunk, and Elliot wonders what keeps him awake. What demons follow a man who's been inside for years? What does it cost to maintain that calm exterior when everything around you is chaos? The second day, things begin to crack. It starts in the library. Elliot is shelving returns when 3 men enter, their body language immediately wrong. They spread out in a way that's clearly tactical, blocking the exit. The largest one, a man with a scar running from his ear to his jaw, approaches with a smile that makes Elliot's stomach turn. "New fish," Scar says. "Heard you were in here. Dante's new toy." Elliot tries to keep his voice steady. "I'm just trying to do my job." "Your job?" Scar laughs and the other two join in. "That's cute. You know what your real job is, pretty boy? Your real job is understanding how things work in here. And things work through trade, favors, protection costs." "I don't have anything to trade." "Sure you do." Scar's eyes travel down Elliot's body in a way that makes his skin crawl. "Everyone's got something." The door opens before the situation can escalate further. Dante fills the doorframe, and the shift in energy is immediate. The 3 men step back as one, their predatory confidence evaporating. "Chen," Dante says calmly, "forgot to tell you. You're wanted in the admin building. Paperwork issue." It's clearly a lie, but Elliot doesn't hesitate. He moves toward Dante, and the larger man's hand comes to rest on his shoulder, a gesture that's both protective and possessive. As they leave, Elliot feels Scar's eyes burning into his back. Once they're in the corridor, Dante's grip tightens. "What did they say to you?" "That protection costs, that I needed to understand how things work." Dante's jaw sets in a way that makes him look dangerous for the first time since they met. Reed, the one with the scar. He runs debt collection for the Aryan Brotherhood faction, preys on new inmates, gets them into impossible situations, then owns them. You stopped it. This time. Dante looks down at him, and Elliot sees genuine concern in his expression. But I can't be everywhere, Chen. You need to be smarter. The library's not safe if you're alone. What am I supposed to do? I can't just hide in our cell. No, but you can make it clear you're not available for whatever Reed thinks he can get from you. Dante's hand is still on his shoulder, warm and solid. Stay visible, stay with groups, and when you can't do either, stay with me. The solution should be simple, but Elliot can feel the complications building like storm clouds. Every hour he spends with Dante, the lines between protection and something else blur a little more. He catches himself noticing details he has no business noticing, the way Dante's hands move when he talks, the rare smile that transforms his serious face, the careful way he navigates the prison's social dynamics with a combination of strength and intelligence that Elliot finds himself reluctantly admiring. And worse, he catches Dante watching him with an intensity that makes it hard to breathe. A week passes, then two. Elliot falls into the rhythm of prison life, the early wake-ups, the terrible food, the constant awareness that violence could erupt at any moment. But with Dante beside him, he begins to feel something he never expected to feel inside these walls. Safe. The problem is, safety has a price, and Elliot doesn't know if he can afford it. It comes to a head 3 weeks in, during evening recreation time. Elliot is reading in their cell when Dante returns from the weight yard, his shirt damp with sweat, his muscles defined in ways that make Elliot forget how to focus on his book. Dante catches him staring and raises an eyebrow. Something on your mind, Chen? Elliot should lie, should deflect. Instead, exhaustion and fear and 3 weeks of tension make him honest. Why do you look at me like that? Like what? Like I'm... He can't finish the sentence. Can't name what he sees in Dante's eyes because naming it makes it real. Dante is quiet for a long moment. Then he sits on his bunk directly below Elliot's, his head tilted back to maintain eye contact. You want the truth? Please. Because you're everything this place isn't. Because you're soft where everything here is hard. Because watching you try to be brave when you're terrified makes me remember what it's like to feel something other than anger. Dante's voice drops lower. And because every time Reed or his crew looks at you like you're prey, I want to break their faces, that's the truth. The confession hangs in the air between them, heavy and dangerous and undeniable. Elliot's heart is racing, his hands trembling around his book. I've never... He starts, then stops. I've never been with... A man, Dante finishes gently. Anyone. The admission costs him, but he forces it out. I've always been too focused on work, on succeeding, on being perfect. I'm 23, and I've never let anyone close enough to... I don't know how any of this works. He expects judgment. Instead, Dante's expression softens in a way that makes Elliot's chest ache. That why you're so scared? Not just of prison, but of this? I don't even know what this is. This, Dante says carefully, is me trying very hard to be good, to keep you safe without crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed, because you're vulnerable and I'm not going to take advantage of that. He pauses. But Chen, you need to stop looking at me like you're trying to figure out if I'm safe, because the answer is no, I'm not safe. I'm the furthest thing from safe for someone like you. What if I don't want safe? The words escape before Elliot can stop them. The temperature in the cell seems to rise 10 degrees. Dante stands slowly, and Elliot realizes he's made a terrible mistake, or maybe the best decision of his life. He can't tell which. You don't know what you're asking for, Dante says, but he's moving closer, his presence overwhelming in the tiny space. Then tell me. Dante stops directly below him, so close Elliot could reach down and touch him if he had the courage. I'm asking you to be careful with what you offer, because I've been alone a long time, because I've been holding back since the day you walked in here, because if you give me permission to stop being careful, I don't know if I can go back. Elliot's response is barely a whisper. Maybe I don't want you to go back. The moment stretches, taut as a wire, and then Dante reaches up. His hand cups the side of Elliot's face with surprising gentleness, thumb brushing his cheekbone. The touch is electric, sending heat through Elliot's entire body. "Last chance to take it back," Dante says softly. Elliot leans into the touch instead of pulling away. "I'm not taking it back." What happens next is both slower and faster than Elliot imagined. Dante guides him down from the bunk with careful hands, and then they're standing face to face in the narrow space between beds. Elliot has to tilt his head back to maintain eye contact, and the difference in their sizes should intimidate him, but somehow makes him feel protected instead. "I need you to understand something," Dante says, his hands resting on Elliot's shoulders. "Whatever this is, whatever happens between us, it's real, not just prison desperation or loneliness. Real. Can you handle that?" "I don't know," Elliot admits, "but I want to try." The kiss, when it comes, is nothing like Elliot imagined a first kiss would be. It's soft at first, questioning, giving him every chance to pull away. But when Elliot responds, tentatively, inexpertly, Dante's control seems to fracture slightly. The kiss deepens, becomes more urgent, and Elliot feels himself being walked backward until his legs hit Dante's bunk. "We need to stop," Dante says, but he doesn't move away. "We need to stop because if we don't, I won't want to." "What if I don't want you to stop?" Elliot's heart is racing, his whole body alive in ways he's never experienced. "Chen," it's a warning and a plea at the same time. "Elliot, my name is Elliot." Something in Dante's expression shifts at hearing his first name. He frames Elliot's face with both hands, his touch gentle despite his obvious strength. "Elliot, then." Beautiful, terrified Elliot who has no idea what he does to me. "Show me," Elliot whispers. "Please. I'm tired of being afraid of everything. I'm tired of never letting anyone close. I'm tired of being alone." "You've never done this before." "I know. I don't want to hurt you." "Then don't." Dante closes his eyes for a moment, clearly warring with himself. When he opens them again, the decision has been made. "Okay, but we do this my way. Slow, careful. And the second you want to stop, we stop. Understood?" Elliot nods, not trusting his voice. What follows is an education in patience and attention. Dante treats him like something precious, like something worth taking time with. Every touch is deliberate, every kiss measured, every movement designed to build trust rather than satisfy urgency. He talks Elliot through each new sensation, checking constantly that he's comfortable, that he's present, that he wants to continue. At some point, Elliot stops being afraid. The vulnerability he's been running from his entire life becomes something else entirely, becomes connection, becomes trust, becomes a kind of intimacy he never knew was possible. Dante shows him what it means to be truly seen by another person, to let someone past every defense and discover that safety doesn't mean being alone, it means being known. When it's over, when they're lying together on the narrow bunk, Elliot's head on Dante's chest, their breathing slowly returning to normal, Elliot feels fundamentally changed, not broken as he'd feared, but finally, impossibly whole. "You okay?" Dante asks quietly, his hand moving in slow circles on Elliot's back. "I'm better than okay," Elliot whispers. I didn't know it could be like that." "Like what?" "Like I mattered. Like I was worth taking care of." Dante's arms tighten around him. "You do matter, and you are worth taking care of. Remember that, especially on the days when this place tries to convince you otherwise." They lie in comfortable silence for a while, and then Elliot asks the question that's been building since they started. "What happens now? We can't exactly date. We can't even let anyone know about this." "We survive," Dante says simply. "We protect each other. We take whatever moments we can find in this impossible place, and we remember that this, whatever this is worth protecting. Even though I'll be gone in less than a year?" Dante is quiet for so long, Elliot thinks he's not going to answer. Then, "Especially because you'll be gone in less than a year. You get to leave, Elliot. You get to go back to your life, find someone appropriate, build the future you're supposed to have. I'll still be here, counting down years instead of months. But for whatever time we have, yeah, It's worth it. The words should hurt, but there's no bitterness in them. Only acceptance of a reality neither of them can change. Elliot lifts his head to look at Dante in the dim light filtering through their cell door. What if I don't want appropriate? What if I want this? You say that now when this place has you scared and lonely and dependent on me for protection. But give it a year. Give it freedom and options and a return to everything you left behind. Then see if you still want a convicted felon with nothing to offer but bad choices and a record. You're not your conviction, Elliot says fiercely. You're not defined by the worst thing you ever did. Dante's smile is sad and knowing. That's sweet. But that's exactly what I am in the eyes of the world. And eventually, that'll be what I am in your eyes too. It's okay. I've made peace with it. I haven't. You will. They fall asleep like that, tangled together in a space too small for one person, let alone two. But somehow they make it work, just like they've made everything else work since Elliot walked through that cell door. The next morning brings complications neither of them anticipated. Reed corners Elliot in the shower block while Dante is at a counseling appointment. 3 of his crew box Elliot in against the tile wall, and Reed's smile is predatory. Heard interesting rumors, Reed says conversationally, about you and your cellmate getting real close. That true? Elliot's heart hammers, but he keeps his expression neutral. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. See, thing is, relationships in here, they complicate things, create vulnerabilities, and vulnerabilities can be exploited. What do you want? Just making sure you understand your position. Dante's got protection because he's earned respect. But you're just a pretty boy with a guard dog, and guard dogs can't be everywhere. Reed leans in close enough that Elliot can smell his breath. Something to think about. They leave him there, shaking and furious and terrified in equal measure. When Elliot makes it back to their cell, Dante takes one look at him and knows. Reed? Elliot nods. What did he say? That you can't be everywhere. That I have vulnerabilities. Dante's expression goes cold in a way Elliot hasn't seen before. Stay here. Don't. Elliot grabs his arm. Don't do whatever you're thinking. That's what he wants. To provoke you into something that'll extend your sentence, or get you sent to solitary. So what? I just let him threaten you? You teach me how to protect myself. You've been protecting me for weeks, but you're right. You can't be everywhere, so show me how to survive without you. The request clearly costs Elliot something to make, and Dante recognizes it. His anger doesn't disappear, but it redirects into something more productive. Okay, but this isn't going to be comfortable. What follows is a crash course in prison survival that Elliot wouldn't have survived a month ago. Dante teaches him how to walk, not like prey, but like someone who knows where they're going and won't be deterred. He teaches him where to position himself in any room to maintain awareness of exits and threats. He teaches him which confrontations to avoid and which to face head-on, and how to tell the difference. He teaches him how to use his intelligence as a weapon when physical strength isn't an option. Most importantly, he teaches Elliot that survival isn't about being the strongest. It's about being the most aware, the most prepared, the most determined to make it through another day. The education takes weeks, and during that time, their relationship deepens in ways that have nothing to do with physical intimacy. They become partners in the truest sense, learning to anticipate each other's needs, to communicate in the subtle ways prison requires, to protect each other's vulnerabilities while building each other's strengths. Elliot discovers that Dante is brilliant. His reading isn't escapism, but genuine love of literature and philosophy. They spend hours debating Sartre and Camus, discussing whether freedom is possible within constraint, whether meaning can be found in suffering. Dante challenges every assumption Elliot brings from his privileged background, and Elliot finds himself changing, growing, becoming someone more authentic than the person who walked through those gates. And somewhere in those late-night conversations, in the stolen moments of gentleness in an otherwise brutal world, Elliot falls completely, irrevocably in love. He doesn't tell Dante How can he, when Dante has already accepted that Elliot will leave and forget, when Dante has built walls around his heart specifically to protect against this kind of pain? But Elliot knows, and knowing changes everything. 6 months pass. Elliot's release date creeps closer, and the bittersweet reality of their situation becomes impossible to ignore. They've created something real in the least real place imaginable, and soon it will be tested by the one thing neither of them can control: freedom. The night before Elliot's release, they lie in their bunk without speaking for a long time. Finally, Dante says, "I need you to promise me something. Anything. When you get out, don't look back. Don't try to wait for me. Don't put your life on hold for someone who might not make it out for years. Build the life you're supposed to have." What if the life I'm supposed to have includes you? It doesn't. It can't. Says who? Says reality. Says society. Says the fact that I'm not good for you, Elliot. I never was. Elliot pushes himself up to look at Dante directly. "You've been nothing but good for me. You protected me when I couldn't protect myself. You taught me strength I didn't know I had. You showed me what real connection feels like. How is that not good? Because you deserved better than finding it in prison. I found it with you. The location doesn't change that." Dante pulls him back down, holding him close. "You're going to make this so much harder than it needs to be, aren't you?" "Probably." Elliot presses his face into Dante's neck. "I love you. I know you don't want to hear it. I know you think I'll change my mind when I get out. But I love you, and I need you to know that before I leave." Dante's arms tighten around him, and Elliot feels wetness on his forehead that might be tears. "I love you too," Dante whispers. "God help me, I love you too. But loving you means wanting better for you than this. Than me." They don't sleep that night. They memorize each other instead. Every touch, every word, every moment of connection. They make promises neither of them knows if they can keep. They say goodbye without saying the word, because saying it would make it too real. When morning comes and Elliot is processed out, Dante isn't allowed to be there. Prison regulations. So their actual goodbye happens in their cell, quick and inadequate and heartbreaking. "Remember what I taught you," Dante says, his hands framing Elliot's face one last time. "Remember you're stronger than you think. Remember that you're worth more than your worst decision," Elliot counters. "Remember that someone loves you exactly as you are." They kiss once more, and then Elliot forces himself to walk away. He doesn't look back, because if he looks back, he'll never leave. Freedom feels wrong. The world is too loud, too bright, too full of choices Elliot doesn't know how to make anymore. He goes back to his parents' house because he has nowhere else to go, and they welcome him with the careful distance of people who aren't sure who he's become. He's not sure either. The first week, Elliot tries to pretend prison never happened. He updates his resume, reaches out to former colleagues, starts the process of rebuilding his professional reputation. But every night, he lies in his comfortable bed in his childhood room and misses the cramped bunk, the warm presence of someone who knew him completely. The second week, he stops pretending. He admits to his parents that he fell in love with his cellmate, that he's not going to move on the way they keep suggesting, that the person who emerged from prison isn't the person who went in. They don't understand, but they stop pushing. The third week, Elliot makes a decision that would have been impossible before prison. He stops caring what's appropriate and starts caring what's true. He contacts the prison, starts the process of getting on Dante's visitor list. It takes 6 weeks of bureaucracy and background checks and letters explaining their relationship in terms vague enough to satisfy regulators. But eventually, he's approved. The first visit is awkward. They sit across from each other in a crowded visiting room, separated by a table, and try to remember how to talk now that the intimacy of their cell is gone. Dante looks different in the harsh lighting, older, more tired, more guarded. "You came," Dante says, and Elliot hears the surprise in his voice. Of course I came. I told you I would. People say a lot of things inside that they don't mean outside. I meant it. Elliot leans forward as much as the guards will allow. I meant all of it. I love you. I'm not going anywhere. And I don't care how long it takes or what anyone thinks. Dante's careful mask cracks slightly. You're killing me, Chen. Elliot. Elliot, then. Beautiful, stubborn Elliot who doesn't know when to quit. I know exactly when to quit, Elliot says firmly. And this isn't it. They talk for the entire allowed 2 hours, rebuilding their connection in stolen moments and carefully worded phrases. When time is up and they have to leave, Dante touches Elliot's hand briefly, the only physical contact allowed, and whispers, "Thank you." For what? For proving me wrong. For being strong enough for both of us. For not giving up. Never, Elliot promises. We survived in there. We'll survive out here too. Just differently. He visits every week, then twice a week. He writes letters every day, filling pages with stories about his life outside, asking questions about Dante's days, maintaining the connection that prison tried to break. And slowly, carefully, they build something new. A relationship that exists across barriers but remains undeniably real. Elliot finds work at a nonprofit that helps former inmates reintegrate. He uses his financial expertise to teach job skills and money management. He becomes an advocate for prison reform, telling his story, carefully edited for public consumption, about how the current system fails to rehabilitate and often traumatizes instead. He lives modestly, saving every penny toward Dante's eventual release. He plans for a future that includes them both, even though Dante still has 3 years left on his sentence. And when people ask why he doesn't date, why he doesn't move on from a relationship that seems impossible, Elliot tells them the truth. Because I already found what I was looking for, and some things are worth waiting for. 3 years pass with agonizing slowness, but they pass. And on a cold February morning, Elliot stands outside the prison gates and waits. When Dante finally walks through those gates, a free man for the first time in 6 years, Elliot is there. They stand for a moment, just looking at each other. And then Dante closes the distance between them and pulls Elliot into his arms. You waited, Dante says against his hair. Of course I waited. I told you I would. I didn't believe you. I know, but I'm patient. You taught me that. They go home together to the small apartment Elliot rented in preparation for this moment. It's not much, but it's theirs. A space where they can build a life without barriers, without guards, without the constant threat of violence. That first night of freedom, Dante is restless. He can't settle, can't relax, keeps expecting the familiar sounds of prison that don't come. Elliot finds him standing at the window at 2 a.m., staring out at the city lights. Can't sleep, Elliot asks gently. Too quiet, too much space, too much everything. Dante's hands are shaking slightly. I don't know how to do this, Elliot. How to be free. We'll figure it out together. Elliot takes his hand, drawing him away from the window. The same way we figured everything else out. One day at a time. They go back to bed, and this time Dante lets himself be held instead of doing the holding. The role reversal is significant. Evidence of trust, of vulnerability, of letting Elliot carry some of the weight for a change. I love you, Dante whispers into the darkness. I loved you in there, and I love you out here, and I'll love you wherever we end up. I'm sorry it took me so long to believe that was allowed. It's allowed, Elliot says firmly. Everything we feel is allowed. Everything we want is allowed. We survived the impossible. Now we get to live. They build that life slowly, carefully, learning to navigate freedom together. Dante struggles with reintegration. Finding work with a record is nearly impossible, and the trauma of prison doesn't disappear just because the walls do. There are hard days when he can't leave the apartment, when the world feels too big and too hostile. There are nights when he wakes gasping, trapped in memories that won't let go. But Elliot is there through all of it. patient, steady, refusing to let Dante face these demons alone. He learns what Dante needs before he asks for it. He creates space for healing while gently pushing toward growth. He loves Dante not despite his damage, but including it, as part of the whole complex person he fell for in that 8x10 cell. And gradually, Dante heals. He finds work at a community center, teaching at-risk youth about avoiding the mistakes he made. He starts speaking at schools about the reality of prison, about how one choice can derail an entire life. He becomes an advocate alongside Elliot, their combined voices calling for change in a system that breaks more people than it fixes. 2 years after Dante's release, Elliot takes him back to that alley behind the restaurant where they had their first kiss outside prison walls. It's been cleaned up, turned into a small community garden. Flowers bloom where trash once accumulated. "Why are we here?" Dante asks, confused. Elliot gets down on one knee, and Dante's eyes go wide. "Because this is where we started learning how to be free together," Elliot says. "And I want to start the next chapter here too. Dante Williams, will you marry me?" Dante pulls him up and kisses him before answering. "You're insane, you know that? Proposing to a felon? Building a life with someone who comes with enough baggage to fill a warehouse. Staying when anyone sensible would have run. Is that a yes?" "That's a hell yes." Dante kisses him again. "You saved my life, Elliot Chen. First in that cell, and every day since. How could I possibly say no?" They marry in a small ceremony surrounded by the family they've built. Former inmates Dante mentored, colleagues from Elliot's nonprofit work, the few relatives who support them. It's not the wedding either of them imagined as children, but it's perfect because it's real. During his vows, Dante says, "You walked into my cell terrified and vulnerable, and somehow you taught me courage. You showed me that strength isn't about walls. It's about being brave enough to let someone in. I promise to protect that bravery, to honor your trust, and to love you fiercely for whatever time we have." Elliot's vows are simpler. "You caught me when I was falling. Now I get to spend the rest of my life catching you back. I love you. I choose you, today and every day after." They build a life that would have seemed impossible from inside those prison walls. They buy a small house with a garden where Elliot grows vegetables and Dante builds furniture from reclaimed wood. They foster teenagers who age out of the system, giving them the support and acceptance they desperately need. They create the kind of home neither of them had growing up, one built on honesty, vulnerability, and unconditional love. On their 5th anniversary, Dante finally talks about his sister, the one he went to prison protecting. She'd disappeared after his conviction, unable to handle the guilt of being the cause of his incarceration. But she finds them through Dante's advocacy work, and the reunion is tearful and complicated, and ultimately healing. "You did that for me," she says, holding her brother's hands. "You sacrificed 6 years for me." "I'd do it again," Dante says simply, "but I'm grateful for what I found in there. I'm grateful for him." He looks at Elliot with undisguised love. "Prison took a lot from me, but it gave me the person I was meant to find." That night, lying in their bed in their house, Elliot says, "Do you ever regret it? What you did?" "I regret the violence," Dante says carefully. "I regret that I let anger control me. But do I regret protecting my sister? Never. And I can't regret where it led, because it led to you. Does that make me a bad person?" "It makes you human," Elliot says. "We're all just people trying to do our best with impossible choices. What matters is what we build after." "And what have we built?" Elliot considers this, looking around their bedroom with its mismatched furniture and walls covered in photos from their life together. Something real, something that survived the worst circumstances imaginable and came out stronger. Something worth fighting for. "Yeah," Dante agrees, pulling him close. "Something worth fighting for." Years later, when they're asked how they met, they're always careful with their answer. "In a difficult situation" is usually enough. The details, the steel doors, the constant threat, the vulnerability and fear and desperate connection, those belong to them alone. But sometimes, when they're speaking to groups about prison reform or criminal justice, they tell the whole story. They talk about how love can bloom in the most unlikely places, how humanity persists even in systems designed to crush it, how two people from completely different worlds found each other in hell and built heaven together. They talk about it because their story matters, not just to them, but to everyone who's been told they're irredeemable, to everyone who's made mistakes and thinks they don't deserve love, to everyone who believes that some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. Their story proves otherwise. Elliot Chen walked into a prison cell, terrified and alone, and found not just protection, but transformation. Dante Williams was counting days until release, and discovered that freedom isn't about walls. It's about finding someone who sees you completely and chooses you anyway. They were broken in different ways, healing in the same space, learning that sometimes the most profound love stories begin in the darkest places, and they emerge not just surviving, but thriving. Proof that redemption is always possible when you find someone worth changing for. On their 10th anniversary, Dante gives Elliot a gift, a key on a simple chain. "What's this?" Elliot asks, turning it over in his hand. "The key to my old cell. I know a guy who knows a guy. Had it made into a necklace." Dante fastens it around Elliot's neck. "Because that's where you found me, where I found you, where everything began." Elliot holds the key, feeling its weight. It should be painful, a reminder of trauma and fear and impossible circumstances. Instead, it feels like hope, like proof that even the locks meant to keep us caged can become symbols of liberation when we find the courage to open them. "I love you," Elliot says, "because after everything, it's still the only thing that matters." "I love you too," Dante replies. "Beautiful, brave Elliot, who saved me by letting me save him, who taught me that being vulnerable is the strongest thing you can do." They kiss there in their garden, surrounded by the life they've built, and remember the terrified boy and the guarded man who found each other in the most unlikely place and refused to let go. Sometimes love is gentle. Sometimes it's wild, sometimes it's patient, and sometimes it's forged in fire and steel and darkness, and emerges stronger because of it. This is one of those times. The years that follow are not without their challenges. Freedom, Elliot discovers, is more complicated than anyone tells you, and loving someone who carries prison inside them, even after the walls are gone, requires patience. He's still learning. Dante has nightmares, not every night, but enough that Elliot learns to recognize the signs, the way his breathing changes, the tension that creeps into his body even in sleep, the small sounds that escape before he wakes gasping. The first time it happens, Elliot makes the mistake of trying to shake him awake. Dante's hand shoots out reflexively, stops inches from Elliot's face, and the horror in his eyes when he realizes what he almost did breaks Elliot's heart. "I could have hurt you," Dante says, his voice shaking. "But you didn't. You stopped. I might not stop next time. Then we figure it out." Elliot takes his hand carefully. "We learn the triggers. We develop strategies. We survive this the same way we survived everything else. Together." They work with a therapist who specializes in incarceration trauma. Dante learns grounding techniques, ways to orient himself when the past tries to drag him under. Elliot learns how to help without hovering, how to provide support without treating Dante like he's fragile. It's hard work, the kind that requires commitment on days when neither of them wants to keep going. But they do keep going, because the alternative, giving up on each other, isn't an option. 3 years after Dante's release, they're grocery shopping when a man in a security uniform walks past. Dante freezes mid-reach for a box of pasta, his whole body going rigid. Elliot sees it immediately. The way Dante's eyes track the uniform, the shallow breathing, the subtle shift in posture like he's preparing for confrontation. "Hey," Elliot says softly, moving to block Dante's view of the guard. "Look at me. Where are we?" "Grocery store," Dante manages, but his voice is tight. "Right, and you're here with me. You're free. That's just security, not a corrections officer. Can you feel my hand?" Elliot takes Dante's hand, squeezes gently. It takes a full minute before Dante's breathing evens out, before the present reasserts itself over the past. When he finally meets Elliot's eyes, there's shame there. "I'm sorry, I thought I was past this." "Trauma doesn't work on a schedule," Elliot reminds him, repeating what their therapist has said countless times. "It gets better, but it doesn't disappear. And that's okay." "It's not okay that I can't even grocery shop without—" "It's okay," Elliot interrupts firmly, "because you're trying, because you're doing the work, because you didn't let it control you. You came back, that's what matters." They finish shopping, and later that night, Dante admits something he's been holding back. "Sometimes I wonder if you regret it, tying yourself to someone this damaged." Elliot sets down the book he's reading and gives Dante his full attention. "You want to know what I regret? I regret that the system that was supposed to rehabilitate you traumatized you instead. I regret that you went through things I'll never fully understand. I regret that you still carry that weight." He moves closer, taking Dante's face in his hands. "But I have never, not for 1 second, regretted loving you. And if you think a few flashbacks are enough to scare me off after everything we've survived, you don't know me very well. I know you better than anyone else ever has. Then you know I'm not going anywhere." Dante pulls him into a kiss that communicates everything. Words can't. Gratitude and love and a desperate hope that maybe, despite everything, they really can make this work. 4 years after release, Dante's advocacy work expands. He's invited to speak at a criminal justice reform conference, to share his story on a panel about the long-term effects of incarceration. Elliot watches from the audience as Dante stands before hundreds of people and tells the truth, not the sanitized version, but the real, raw story of violence and fear and unexpected love. "I went to prison for assault," Dante says, his voice steady despite the difficulty of the confession. "I made a choice to solve a problem with violence, and I paid for it with 6 years of my life. But the worst part isn't the time I lost. It's what the system did to me while I was inside." He talks about the constant threat, the dehumanization, the way prison strips away your sense of self until you're just a number and a conviction. He talks about the guards who abused their power, the inmates who preyed on the vulnerable, the total absence of anything resembling rehabilitation. And then he talks about Elliot. Not by name, they agreed on that boundary, but about finding unexpected connection in an impossible place. "I met someone inside who reminded me I was still human," Dante says. "Someone who was terrified and vulnerable and needed protection. And by protecting them, I remembered that I was capable of gentleness, that I could be more than my anger, more than my worst decision. They saw past the conviction to the person underneath, and that changed everything." He talks about the difficulty of maintaining that connection after release, about how trauma doesn't end when you walk through the gates, about the daily work of healing. Freedom isn't a moment, it's a process, and it's a process you can't do alone. "I'm only standing here today because someone believed I was worth the effort. Someone who stayed when leaving would have been easier." When the panel ends, dozens of people approach Dante. Formerly incarcerated individuals who see themselves in his story, family members of inmates who need hope that their loved ones can heal, activists looking for authentic voices in the reform movement. Elliot watches Dante handle each conversation with patience and compassion and feels overwhelming pride in the man he loves. That night, back in their hotel room, Dante collapses on the bed, emotionally exhausted. "That was harder than I expected." "You were incredible," Elliot says, lying beside him. "You gave people hope." "I gave them truth. Hope is just a side effect. Truth that leads to hope is the best kind of truth." Dante turns to look at him, really look at him. "How did you do it? How did you stay? I've been free for 4 years and I still don't understand how you didn't run the first chance you got." It's not the first time Dante has asked this question in various forms, and Elliot knows it won't be the last. Self-worth, when it's been systematically destroyed, takes years to rebuild. "Because loving you was never a burden," Elliot says simply. "It was a privilege. You think you're damaged. I think you're someone who survived hell and came out with your humanity intact. That's not weakness. That's strength I can't even comprehend. You're too good for me. I'm exactly good enough for you, and you're exactly good enough for me. We're perfectly matched in our imperfection. Dante laughs, the sound surprised out of him. Perfectly matched in our imperfection. I like that. Good, because I'm planning to imperfectly match you for the next 50 years or so. Just 50? I'm being conservative. Could be 60 if we're lucky. They fall asleep tangled together, and for once, Dante doesn't have nightmares. The peaceful sleep feels like progress. Small, but real. 5 years after release, they decide to move. The city has too many memories, too many places that trigger Dante's trauma. They find a small town upstate, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and newcomers are both scrutinized and welcomed in equal measure. The real estate agent shows them a house that needs work, the kind of fixer-upper that most couples would run from. But Elliot sees the potential, and Dante sees a project that will require all his carpentry skills. They buy it despite everyone's advice to the contrary. The renovation becomes their shared therapy. Every wall they tear down feels symbolic, clearing away what's broken to build something new. Every room they restore together is a promise that they can take something damaged and make it beautiful again. Their neighbors are curious about the two men renovating the old Henderson place. Curious but not hostile, which is more than either of them dared hope for. They're invited to a neighborhood barbecue where Dante is quiet and watchful while Elliot handles the social navigation. "So what brings you two to our little town?" asks Martha Henderson, a 70-year-old woman who seems to run the neighborhood association. "Fresh start," Elliot says carefully. "We needed somewhere quieter than the city." "And what do you do?" "I work for a nonprofit focused on criminal justice reform. Dante does community outreach and construction." Martha's eyes are sharp but not unkind. "Criminal justice reform. That's code for you work with ex-cons, isn't it?" The table goes quiet. Elliot feels Dante tense beside him, preparing for rejection they've faced before. But Martha just nods thoughtfully. "My grandson did 3 years for drug possession," she says. "Came out. Worse than he went in. System's broken top to bottom, if you ask me. We could use people who actually want to fix it. The acceptance isn't universal. Some neighbors keep their distance, whisper when they think Dante can't hear. But enough people are welcoming that they begin to build a community. For the first time since prison, Dante starts to feel like he might belong somewhere. 6 months after the move, Dante is working on their back deck when he sees movement in the yard next door. A teenage boy, maybe 16, is sitting against a tree with a book. Something about his posture, hunched, defensive, like he's trying to take up as little space as possible, reminds Dante of Elliot that first day in their cell. "Good book?" Dante calls over. The kid startles, then shrugs. "It's okay." "What are you reading?" "To Kill a Mockingbird. For school." Dante sets down his hammer and walks to the fence. "That's a good one. First time reading it?" "Yeah, it's pretty heavy." "That's kind of the point. Sometimes the heaviest stories are the ones worth reading." The kid studies him with careful eyes. "You're one of the new guys, right? Moved into the Henderson place?" "Dante, and yeah, that's us." "I'm Tyler." He hesitates, then adds, "My parents said I should stay away from you guys." "Because we're gay?" "Because you're—" Tyler stops, clearly uncomfortable. "Because I'm an ex-con?" Dante finishes gently. "Yeah, I am. Did 3 years for assault, so if your parents want you to keep distance, that's their call. But I'm not dangerous, Tyler. Just someone who made a mistake and trying to do better." Tyler processes this, his expression thoughtful. "What was it like? Prison?" "Hard. Really hard. Not something I'd wish on anyone." "My brother might be going," Tyler blurts out. "He got arrested for dealing. My parents are freaking out." Dante's chest tightens with familiar pain. "How old is your brother?" 19. "He says he'll be fine, but I'm scared for him." "You should be. Prison changes people. But if he does end up going, there are things he can do to protect himself, things he needs to know." They talk for 20 minutes. Dante sharing practical advice he wishes someone had given him. Tyler listening with desperate attention. When Elliot comes out to check on the deck's progress, he finds Dante still at the fence, talking to their neighbor's kid like it's the most natural thing in the world. That conversation becomes the first of many. Tyler starts coming over regularly, ostensibly to help with renovation work, but really to talk. His brother does end up getting sentenced to 18 months, and Dante helps the family understand what to expect, how to support him, what resources exist. Word spreads. Other families with incarcerated loved ones start reaching out. Dante finds himself doing informal counseling, sharing his story, offering the kind of support that only someone who's lived through it can provide. "You're building something," Elliot observes one evening as they watch another family leave their house, visibly relieved after talking to Dante. "This could be more than just volunteer work." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you could make this official. Start a support group for families of incarcerated individuals. Use your experience to help people navigate the system." Dante considers this. "That would mean being more public about my past." "You're already public about it. You speak at conferences. You do advocacy work. This would just be focusing that energy locally, where it can make the most immediate difference." The idea takes root. Within 6 months, Dante has established the Fresh Start Foundation, a nonprofit providing support, resources, and advocacy for families dealing with incarceration. They meet weekly in their renovated living room, and the group grows from 3 families to 15, then 30. Elliot watches Dante transform as he finds purpose in his pain. The nightmares become less frequent. The hypervigilance eases slightly. The shame that has followed him since conviction begins to lift, replaced by something that might actually be pride. 7 years after release, on a crisp October morning, Dante receives a letter that changes everything. It's from Reed, the man who threatened Elliot in prison, who made their time inside even more dangerous than it already was. Dante's hands shake as he reads it. Elliot finds him at the kitchen table, the letter spread before him, his expression unreadable. "What is it?" Elliot asks carefully. "Reed. He's getting out next month. He's asking if I can help him reintegrate. Says he heard about my foundation, about the work I'm doing. Says he wants to do better." The request is absurd. This man made their lives hell, threatened Elliot repeatedly, represented everything brutal about prison, and now he wants Dante's help? "What are you going to do?" Elliot asks. Dante is quiet for a long time. Then, "I'm going to help him." "You're what?" "I'm going to help him. Because if I only help the people I like, the people who never hurt me, then what's the point? The whole system is built on punishment and revenge. Someone has to break that cycle." "He threatened me, Dante. Multiple times." "I know. Believe me, I know." Dante finally looks up, and Elliot sees the conflict in his eyes. "Part of me wants to tell him to go to hell, but the other part, the part that's been doing this work, that understands how the system creates monsters, that part knows he deserves a chance at redemption, even if he doesn't deserve my forgiveness. It's the most difficult thing Elliot has ever been asked to accept, but he understands the principle, even as it makes him uncomfortable. Okay, but I don't have to like it. You don't have to like it. You just have to trust that I know what I'm doing." When Reed is released, he shows up at their door looking older and smaller than Elliot remembers. Prison has aged him, carved lines into his face that weren't there before. His aggressive confidence has been replaced by something that might be humility, or might just be exhaustion. "Dante," Reed says, and there's no threat in his voice now, just weariness. "Thanks for agreeing to see me." "Come in," Dante says, though Elliot can see how much the invitation costs him. They sit in the living room, the same room where support group meetings happen, where families find hope. Reed looks around, taking in the careful restoration, the photos on the walls, the evidence of a life built with love and intention. "You did good," Reed says quietly. "Better than any of us thought you could." "Why are you really here?" Dante asks directly. Reed takes a breath. "Because I got out and I had nowhere to go. No family that'll take me. No skills beyond what I learned inside. And I'm trying not to go back to what I was, the person who hurt people because I was hurt. But I don't know how to do that alone." "Why should I help you? You made my life hell. You threatened my—" Dante stops himself, but the implication is clear. You shouldn't, Reed admits. I don't deserve your help, but I'm asking anyway, because I don't know who else to ask, and because you're the only person I know who actually made it out and built something real. Elliot watches this exchange from the doorway, sees Dante wrestling with competing impulses, the desire for revenge versus the commitment to his principles. It's one thing to talk about redemption in abstract terms. It's another to offer it to someone who hurt you directly. Finally, Dante says, I'll help you, not because you deserve it, but because everyone deserves a chance to change. But you need to understand something. This isn't forgiveness. I don't forgive you for what you did. This is me choosing to believe that you can be better than you were. I'll take it, Reed says. Over the following months, Reed becomes an unexpected part of their community. He attends support groups, shares his own story of childhood trauma and cycles of violence. He does construction work with Dante, learning carpentry skills that give him a legitimate career path. He's quiet and careful, clearly trying to prove through action what words can't convey. One evening, 6 months after his release, Reed asks to speak with both of them privately. They sit on the deck Dante built, the one where he first talked to Tyler, and Reed says what he came to say. I owe you both an apology, not just for what I did inside, but for who I was. I was raised to believe strength meant domination, that vulnerability was weakness, that people like you, he looks at Elliot, then Dante, were somehow less than human, and I acted on those beliefs in ways that were cruel and unforgivable. He takes a shaky breath. Being inside, that should have made me better, but it just made me worse. I became more of the monster I was raised to be. And then I got out and I watched you two. The way you are with each other, the work you do, the life you built, and I realized I had it exactly backward. You're stronger than I ever was, because real strength isn't about intimidation. It's about being brave enough to be vulnerable, to love someone, to try to make things better even when it's hard. I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know I see you now, really see you, and I'm sorry for the time when I didn't. Elliot is the one who responds, his voice careful but sincere. Thank you for saying that. It doesn't erase what happened, but it matters that you recognize it, that you're trying to be different. Are you, Dante asks, actually different, or just better at hiding who you were? I don't know yet, Reed admits. I'm working on it, every day. Some days are easier than others, but I'm trying. That's all any of us can do, Dante says. Try, fail, try again. Keep trying until we get it right. The redemption of someone who once represented everything they feared becomes a powerful example of what the Fresh Start Foundation stands for. Reed begins speaking at their events, sharing his story of transformation with uncomfortable honesty. He doesn't make excuses or minimize his past behavior. He owns it completely while demonstrating what change can look like when someone commits to it. Not everyone is convinced. Some group members think Reed shouldn't be allowed in their space, that his presence is a betrayal of everyone he hurt. Elliot understands their position. He feels it himself sometimes, when he sees Reed and remembers the fear from those prison confrontations. But Dante holds firm. If we only believe in redemption for people who never really hurt us, then we don't actually believe in redemption at all. We believe in conditional forgiveness, which isn't forgiveness at all. 8 years after Dante's release, Fresh Start Foundation has grown beyond what either of them imagined. They've helped over 200 families navigate the criminal justice system. They've lobbied successfully for local policy changes. They've created job training programs that give formerly incarcerated individuals real opportunities. And through it all, their relationship has deepened into something that feels unshakable. They've weathered Dante's trauma, Elliot's learning curve, the judgment of people who don't understand, the complications of building a life from broken pieces. They've proven that love forged in impossible circumstances doesn't become fragile when those circumstances change. It becomes stronger for having survived them. On their 10th anniversary, their living room is packed with people celebrating, families from the foundation, colleagues from their advocacy work, neighbors who've become genuine friends. Tyler is there, now in college studying social work, inspired by Dante's example. Reed is there, quiet but present, a living testament to the possibility of change. Martha Henderson stands to give a toast. 10 years ago, these two moved into our neighborhood, and I'll admit, we didn't know what to make of them. Two men from the city, one with a record, buying the old Henderson place that everyone said was beyond saving. We wondered if they'd last 6 months. She smiles at them. But they did what they always do. They took something broken and made it beautiful. Not just the house, but this whole community. They've taught us that redemption isn't just possible, it's necessary. That everyone deserves a second chance, including the people who scare us the most. They've shown us what love looks like when it's tested by the worst circumstances imaginable and comes through stronger. The room erupts in applause. Elliot reaches for Dante's hand and finds it already reaching for his. Later, when the party has wound down and they're alone in their kitchen cleaning up, Dante pulls Elliot into his arms. "You know what I was thinking about today?" "What?" "That terrified kid who walked into my cell a decade ago. How scared you were. How convinced you wouldn't survive." "I wouldn't have," Elliot says honestly. "Not without you." "That's not true. You were always stronger than you thought. I just helped you see it. We helped each other see it. That's what we do. We hold up mirrors for each other until we can see ourselves clearly." Dante kisses him, slow and sweet. "I love you, Elliot Chen. Thank you for proving me wrong about everything. For staying. For believing I was worth the trouble. For building this life with me. I love you too. And you were absolutely worth the trouble. Even when the trouble felt impossible." They finish cleaning in comfortable silence, moving around each other with the ease of long practice. When they finally head upstairs to bed, Elliot pauses at the landing to look back at their house, at the photos documenting their life together, at the evidence of community they've built, at the physical manifestation of everything they've overcome. "You good?" Dante asks, noticing his pause. "Yeah, just grateful for all of it. Even the hard parts that led us here." "Even prison?" Elliot considers this carefully. "I'm not grateful for prison. I'm grateful for what we built despite prison, for finding each other in that impossible place and refusing to let it destroy us, for turning the worst experience of our lives into the foundation for the best parts. That's a good way to think about it." They go to bed, and for the first time in years, Elliot thinks about that first night in their cell. How terrified he was, how certain he wouldn't survive, how impossible their current life would have seemed. If someone had told him then that he'd find love, purpose, community, and home with the man who caught him when he was falling, he never would have believed them. But here they are, a decade later, still together, still building, still proving that redemption is possible when you find someone willing to walk the hard path with you. The nightmares still come occasionally. The triggers don't disappear. The trauma of prison doesn't just vanish because time has passed, but they've learned to hold each other through the dark moments, to trust that morning will come, that healing is a process rather than a destination. And on the good days, which are most days now, they remember why they fought so hard for this. Why Elliot stayed when leaving would have been easier. Why Dante believed in redemption when revenge would have been simpler. Why they built a life around helping others find the second chances they were given. 15 years after that first meeting in a prison cell, they're both older and grayer and marked by everything they've survived. But they're also more themselves than they've ever been. People who learned that strength comes from vulnerability, that courage means staying when running would be easier, that love isn't about perfection, but about choosing each other every single day, despite the imperfections. On a random Tuesday morning, Elliot wakes to find Dante already up, sitting at their bedroom window watching the sunrise. It's become his meditation practice, starting each day with quiet reflection, grounding himself in the present rather than getting lost in the past. Elliot joins him, wrapping his arms around Dante from behind. They don't speak, just watch the sky lighten from purple to pink to gold. Finally, Dante says, Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if I'd been assigned a different cellmate? If you'd walked into someone else's cell instead of mine? Sometimes, but I think we found each other for a reason. You believe in fate? I believe that sometimes the universe puts people exactly where they need to be, even if it doesn't make sense at the time. I needed you to teach me strength. You needed me to teach you vulnerability. We needed each other to remember what it means to be fully human in a place designed to strip that away. That's almost poetic. I learned from the best. You taught me that surviving isn't enough. You have to find meaning in the survival. Dante turns in his arms, and even after all these years, the sight of him still makes Elliot's heart race. I found my meaning, Dante says. It's you. It's this. It's everything we built from nothing. They kiss as the sun finishes rising, and Elliot thinks about how far they've come from that first terrified kiss in a prison cell. How much they've grown, how much they've learned, how much they've survived. And he thinks about all the people they've helped along the way, the families who found hope through their foundation, the formerly incarcerated individuals who discovered second chances, the community that learned redemption is always possible when you're brave enough to believe in it. Their story isn't a fairy tale. There's no perfect ending, no moment where all problems disappear. But it's real. It's theirs. And it's proof that love can survive anything if both people are willing to fight for it. Later that day, a young man shows up at their door. He's just been released, terrified and alone, with nowhere to go. Dante recognizes the look in his eyes immediately. It's the same look Elliot had that first day. "Come in," Dante says gently. "Let's figure this out together." And the cycle continues. Broken people helping each other heal, finding strength in vulnerability, proving that redemption isn't just a concept but a lived reality. One person at a time, one day at a time, one act of courage at a time. Elliot watches Dante work with the young man, offering the same patient guidance he once offered Elliot, and feels overwhelming love for this man who transforms pain into purpose, who takes every hard lesson learned and passes it forward, who never forgot what it felt like to be scared and alone, and uses that memory to help others find their way. This is their legacy, not just the foundation or the advocacy work, but the lives they've touched by refusing to let prison be the end of their story, by insisting that everyone deserves a second chance, especially the people who seem least deserving. That night, as they're falling asleep, Dante whispers, "Thank you." For what? For being brave enough to ask me to be gentle that first time. For trusting me with your vulnerability. For seeing past everything I'd done to who I could become. For staying. Thank you for catching me when I fell. For protecting me when I couldn't protect myself. For teaching me that strength and gentleness can coexist. For building this life with me. We built it together. "Yeah," Elliot agrees, tightening his arms around Dante. "We did." They sleep peacefully. Two people who found each other in hell and built heaven together. Two people who prove every single day that redemption is possible, that love can survive anything, that the lines we think can never be uncrossed are actually just waiting for someone brave enough to step over them. Their story isn't about prison. It's about what happens after. About the daily choice to keep loving, keep trying, keep believing in the possibility of transformation. It's about looking at someone's worst moment and seeing their potential for growth. It's about being brave enough to be vulnerable in a world that punishes vulnerability. Most of all, it's about the simple truth that saved them both. Everyone deserves gentleness, especially those who've never experienced it. Everyone deserves a second chance, especially those who seem beyond redemption. And everyone deserves love, especially those who think they're unlovable. Dante and Elliot learned that lesson in the hardest way possible, and they've spent every day since teaching it to everyone willing to listen. That's their real story, not the dramatic beginning in a prison cell, but the quiet persistence of building a life worth living. The unsexy work of healing, the daily choice to be better than the worst things that happen to them. And 15 years later, they're still choosing, still building, still proving that love forged in darkness burns brightest of all. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and tell me where you're listening from, because everyone deserves to hear that second chances are possible, that love can survive anything, that the worst beginning can lead to the most beautiful middle and ending. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say to someone is, be gentle. And sometimes the most powerful response is actually being gentle, even when everything inside you wants to lose control. Dante and Elliot learned that lesson together, and they've spent every day since teaching it to a world that desperately needs to hear it.